my pleasure to invite you to the second annual ThoughtWorks Live we are having in Chicago. Our hope is to create a network of executives like you, people who have similar problems, trying to solve them with a certain mindset. If we can create a network of you, not just in this forum, but on an ongoing basis, help you collaborate, work together, for us that's a success. And that's what we're really trying to do.
But the big challenge is we don't actually know how these technologies are going to be adopted. And that's really what we want to talk about today, is there's new technology coming. We can see that there's massive potential, but we don't yet have a clear picture of what's going to be adopted. And this is causing some real business challenges. There's a technology cause, but it's got a business effect. And I think our thesis is that you need more than just a technology response. You actually need a whole organizational response if you're going to survive and thrive in this future. There's this idea that if you're brainstorming, if you're trying to innovate, there should be laughter coming out of the room. If there isn't laughter coming out of the room, you're probably doing something wrong. And in fact, I have a metric for assessing new startups. And if they have a good pun as their name or as their domain name, then they're probably doing something right.
We were really excited about bringing computing down to smaller devices and making really this. We had a vision already in about 2000 that computing would become a handheld type of activity. Apple and Samsung overwhelmingly took the revenue away from Nokia. You wouldn't have likely predicted that two players would capture not just the bulk of revenues, but the bulk of profits. And yet it happened. It's very, very, very dramatic. This is the mobile phone industry that sells in the billions of units a year.
Don Saul wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Upside of Turbulence, talking about turbulent marketplaces and what to do about it. And he has this quote in there that's really stuck with me over the last few years. Companies don't pass through life cycles. Opportunities do. How do we find these opportunities? How do we look for these kinds of opportunities? And so, and how do we kind of plot them out? So I got to thinking about, I was looking at the ThoughtWorks technology radar. And I know all of you can read this. But I kept looking at this technology radar, which really looks at different technologies and kind of evaluates how we ought to be looking at them. And I really thought, wow, how about a customized opportunity radar for your organization? And so between the life cycle phases of opportunities and a radar, you can begin to look at different things and where they ought to be. But this is a way of graphically sort of looking at what are our opportunities and what should we be doing and what stage should we be putting them in and how much should we be investing in these particular opportunities. Because finding those opportunities to start with and then evaluating those opportunities in multiple different ways is really the starting point.
There's all sorts of devices out there now and a growth in the variety of them. And we all have to think about the user experience in terms of what does the user experience have to be, how can they utilize these different devices, and how can they play in a single flow. And it's I think a big mistake to say you have a different mobile team, different web team, and they're thinking independently about those user experiences.
Follow the value. Now, it's just an obvious one. You go where the value is. But I also mean something a little bit more specific here in the case of mobile applications, that not all mobile users and handset market shares are actually created equally. Someone was asking earlier today about how do you choose between targeting iOS and Android. Examine your market, have a look at that, because in some markets, iOS users are more valuable than Android, and vice versa in other markets. You need to look at who's got what and why they have that and why they're reacting that way.
But we did pull our app from the App Store. We did not expand it. We haven't expanded it. We will, in the future, and that's part of where we're going. But what we did was we came back and said, hey, we're going to go with an HTML5 and a responsive web design approach. There's HTML5 was, you talked about IE6 and some of the non-standard stuff that we have to do to support cross browsers. HTML5 was a godsend. It was like, wow, we can build HTML5 and we can cover just about every smartphone on the planet. And oh, by the way, if you do something like a responsive web design, then you can also cover, tablets. But it came really close to a more of a desktop web experience, or even a desktop native experience. Many of our customers' employees, they know exactly what website to go to see what their paycheck is, to see what their W-2 looks like, or their T4. And so when you have an HTML5 and responsive web design, now they go to the exact same place they go to on their desktop browser, and voila, they have a mobile experience.
It's a Welsh word, it's the Cynefin model. I'm reliably informed by my Welsh friends. Introduced by a guy called Dave Snowden, who's interesting and worth looking up. But basically this model is about understanding how to act should be based on an understanding of the structure of the context in which you're working, and really the state of order in that context.
Whoever's leading in the marketplace right now, whoever is dominating a particular platform, and not just talking about mobile platforms here, but also just back-end systems, back-end tool sets, technology stacks. And there's a lot to be said for saying big survives change. Find me the guy who's leading the market right now, and that's the guy that's going to in the long run be the one that's your best bet for surviving change as you go forward.
Obvious products are getting less and less. I think everybody knows that from what we've talked about today. The sort of landscape of technology and kind of how we think about building products means that there's less and less easy gaps to exploit. And this role really suffered from demand-driven, a segment says this, a person says this, and I'm going to build it kind of word for word. And as we move into new media, and what I mean by media through the rest of the talk is devices, shattered future kind of things, that it's hard to play this game where you just see something obvious, do the business case, and execute against it.
There's all of these different opportunities to use analytics. We are in a situation right now, or in an environment right now, where you are probably sitting on a mound of corporate data, transactional, operational, and other data. Sensors are now ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Cameras, other kinds of sensors are providing data in a continuous stream. How do we deal with that? How do we avoid hoarding that data unnecessarily? How do we find ways to create value from that data?
I'm expecting data scientists to be like the most overhyped and undervalued term of the year. We're already seeing a whole bunch of statistics books that are relabeling themselves data science books without actually changing the content very much. There are now university courses where you can get a data science degree, so there's clearly a lot of hype around that. But we actually think this is a role where somebody needs to have an awful lot of experience in a research field, often academic research, a deep statistical background so that they can really understand the different techniques that you can bring to bear on a particular data set.
The way we innovate is using an approach I call a smart approach that dominated throughout the 20th century. And what I want to share with you today is an alternative approach, neither better or worse, but I would say an alternative approach which I call a wise approach. And it's wise because it's frugal, it's flexible, it's inclusive. Despite investing so much money in R&D, companies are not necessarily as innovative as we want. As a matter of fact, what they discovered is that there's no correlation between how much money you spend on R&D and how innovative you are. What I admire about these leaders who are frugal, flexible, inclusive, in a way, I think they follow the heart. And I know we talked about a lot of analytics, no offense, I think these are important, but data can only help you so far. At some point though, you have to believe in what you believe, what you kind of, your gut tells you.
You guys have been very patient. Thank you very much for coming, and we will see you next time.